Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. With the Federalist Society flunkies on the Supreme Court having carried out their attack on the Voting Rights Act, it seems that some of the boule bootlicks have crawled out of their hole, and they're of course giving their opinion on it.
Folks, we need to call this what it is, and that is an absolute attack on Black America by the Republican Party. And there should be a state of emergency in Black America with what is going on. What we should be looking to is having a freedom summer where we are educating, informing, and enlightening folks, signing people up. This must be the most aggressive Black voter campaign since the Civil Rights Movement.
Somebody please tell Roly that we've been here before. No, literally, this has happened before. Louisiana Republicans sued a majority Black congressional district, and the Supreme Court rubber-stamped it.
This is not new for me. I've been down this road before. 33 years ago, the same court and the same plaintiffs, for the most part, filed a lawsuit against the, at that time, the 4th Congressional District. And they basically said that it was a racial gerrymander. And the courts ruled that they were right. The legislature went back and eliminated the district. Here we go again. I've never served a day in Congress without a lawsuit in the Supreme Court.
Now, you notice how Congressman Cleo Fields said that this happened 33 years ago. That would have been 1993, the first year of Bill Clinton's first term. So, as I told you on Sunday, these attacks on the Voting Rights Act are not new at all. It's been going on for generations, long before Shelby v. Holder 13 years ago. Of course, the difference is there wasn't a Supreme Court packed with Federalist Society operatives then. As soon as W began packing the course with Federalist Society flunkies, that should have been the quote-unquote state of emergency for the Democrats and certainly for the Congressional Black Caucus. This certainly isn't the first time the GOP's been undermining Black political power by targeting Black elected officials. They've been doing that heavy for decades at the state level, starting with when Republicans controlled the Michigan legislature and passed that so-called emergency manager law, which the voters rejected, but the GOP legislature passed the exact same law only in pieces, even though that should have still been illegal. The result of that was Republicans declared that the Detroit City Council was barred from running its own city, and they then carried out the genocidal poisoning of the Flint water supply. Democrats got control of the White House, and what did the tether-in-chief Obama and his tether attorney general Eric Holder do about all this? Nothing. They didn't prosecute anyone. There were no measures put in place by the Democrats to punish the Republicans or even to rein them in. Obama instead did a no-good photo op in Flint where he pretended to drink the water, and he declared that he had replaced some pipes there, so that was all he had to do. And then Democrats gained control of the Michigan legislature. They drove the Republicans out of the majority, and then Gretchen Whitmer became governor, and then you got another Democratic state attorney general. What have Democrats done in Michigan to punish Republicans for all of their legislative crimes against Black Michigan residents? Nothing. And that's the reason why the Republicans did the same thing in Jackson, Mississippi, and then they did it in Tennessee with Memphis and Nashville, and now they're doing the same thing in New Orleans. Oh, and did I mention that the lawsuit that was used to justify striking down the Voting Rights Act came out of Louisiana? While all these attacks on Black cities has been going on across Democratic and Republican administrations, what have the Democrats done to retaliate for this? Because Black people have certainly been voting for them. The Democrats did nothing. See, what Roly-Poly isn't telling you is that we've already had freedom summers, and freedom winters, and freedom springs, and freedom fall fish fries. The problem isn't getting Black people to vote. The problem is that we never actually get anything for our vote. So while Roly's getting all worked up about a voter drive, I want to know, what are Democrats going to do for Black voters if we vote for them again? Notice how that never, ever, ever gets mentioned. Nobody ever says what Black voters are going to get from Democrats if we put them in office. Democrats certainly never say what they're going to do about all of these attacks on Black civil rights. What are they doing about the attacks on Black voting rights? Democrats never say what they're going to do. And this is just roly-poly trying to sell the soap. He's still trying to prove to the DNC that they need to put him on the payroll and make him a consultant. Because roly-poly knows how to galvanize those black voters, don't you know? That's all he's doing, auditioning for a job. So he's repeating the same old stale gibberish. He can't even be bothered to update his DNC talking points. What is the policy going to be to stop these GOP attacks on black America? And more importantly, what is the punishment going to be? Even roly-poly doesn't talk about that. The problem isn't that Democrats don't know how to use the so-called bully pulpit, or that they don't know how to throw their weight around. All it took was a handful of campus protests criticizing Israel, and Democrats immediately jumped to the point and proudly told the thugs in blue to carry out Benjamin Netanyahu's agenda in the U.S. in flagrant violation of the First Amendment. So Democrats know how to have sharp elbows. They know how to put on the steel-toed boots and run roughshod over people. They just can't do it with the white right, that's all. As Democrats see it, this is a good thing that's happening because they hope it's going to put the kind of pressure on black folks that will get black people to abandon our demands. Stop putting pressure on the Democrats to do anything. Just mindlessly vote or the Republicans are going to get you. Democrats aren't saying what they're going to do. They've just got their shills out here saying, panic everybody, only the Democrats can save us. Well, based on what I've seen, Democrats can't even save themselves. Cleo Fields is saying that there need to be term limits for Supreme Court justices. I actually like that suggestion because it's exactly the kind of bold, radical thing that needs to happen. But the problem is, why isn't Chuck Schumer saying this? Hakeem Jeffries isn't raising hell about it either. Ayanna Pressley mentioned it in passing. The most that I could find about Hakeem Jeffries is that he did mention Supreme Court term limits back in the summer of 2024. So in other words, just in time for Trump's re-election. Jeffries claimed that Biden was right about the idea, but does anyone remember that senile old codger actually talking about it? When did Joe Biden ever make Supreme Court term limits a part of his electoral campaign? When did he ever deliver a major policy speech about it, or a minor policy speech about it? Did he ever mention it at a State of the Union address? Because that would have been the perfect time to bring it up. Throw it right in the faces of those Federalist Society flunkies in front of the entire country. Make it clear, hey, I called the entire country together to hear the State of the Union address, and the next major policy issue that we need to put on the books is getting these Federalist Society flunkies out of here. Any of them who have been in there for longer than 15 years, tell them you're gone. Why not put that on the table in front of the country? Get it out there. But of course, they were never going to do it. It was never going to be the subject of a major policy speech or even a minor policy speech, or any policy speech at all. So even with Hakeem Jeffries having done a blink and you'll miss it mention of Supreme Court term limits, exactly how seriously are we supposed to take this suggestion? Democrats are not going on a warpath about it. Why aren't Democrats as a group running on a platform that if they get back control of the House and the Senate, they're going to bring legislation to impose term limits on the Supreme Court? Make it a part of their policy platform. Put it in front of voters that Democrats are going to rein in this illegal Supreme Court, and that finally somebody at the federal level, other than the president, is going to have term limits imposed on them. Democrats are anything but enthused about the prospect of demanding Supreme Court term limits. Maybe it's because as soon as you bring up that subject, people start going, well, gee, when are you guys going to vote to have term limits for members of the House and the Senate? Interesting how both the Democrats and the Republicans' knees get to knocking whenever somebody talks about term limits. Even with this situation going on, when you have a blatant rubber stamp committee illegally disregarding the Constitution and just trampling over the law, Democrats still don't have the gumption to say we're going to get these guys out of here because they're terrified of the possible political blowback to themselves. But there's also another reason why Democrats are not enthused about Supreme Court term limits. Because they would have to do it on the grounds of sticking up for black voters, and the Democrats have an open policy that they're never going to do that. Now, if we were talking about abortion or some other pet issue of the white left, they would be totally enthused about that. They'd be on a war footing, but they can't get the momentum they need from those issues. That's why they're always trying to run that con game on foundational black Americans that when Democrats talk about voting restrictions, that it has to do with us, and not with making sure that illegal aliens can finally vote. They did the same thing with that gay marriage law that they passed a few years back. They claimed that it was supposed to keep interracial marriages from getting abolished by the Supreme Court. But when they talked about interracial marriages specifically, they didn't talk about, say, whites and Asians marrying. They limited their entire sales pitch to black and fill in the blank. But we know why Democrats aren't enthusiastic about this. It's because both parties rely on judges being in the tank for them for their own pet issues. It's the same reason why neither party wants grand jury proceedings to be public like trial juries are. Because the grand jury is where they bury prosecutions that they don't actually want to bring to trial. And then, of course, they blame the jury and everybody just shrugs because the proceedings were secret, so nobody actually knows what happened. Though on the few occasions when we did get the information, like the Breonna Taylor murder trial, we found out that these slimy prosecutors like Daniel Cameron were in court telling the grand jury not to indict, exactly what we knew they were doing. But neither party wants to give up that ability to be able to throw a rock and hide their hands. And while we're talking about the Voting Rights Act not being defended, where are the Black Immigrant Caucus members at times like this? They're predictably on a warpath to protect TPS. That's the only case before the Supreme Court that they care about. They've already forgotten all about the Voting Rights Act, and as I told you, all you have to do is look at the states where these immigrants in the Congressional Black Caucus come from, and you see why they're not worried. Richie Torres, he's in New York, so there's no way the GOP can eliminate his seat through redistricting. Yvette Clarke, there's another immigrant in New York. Her parents are Jamaican. Ilhan Omar is in Minnesota, so the GOP can't redraw her seat out of existence either. Joe Neguse is in California. Stephen Horsford's out in Nevada. When you hear that Ron DeSantis is signing off on Florida's GOP gerrymandered map, and Greg Abbott's done the same in Texas, and Jeff Landry in Louisiana has taken the unprecedented step of suspending elections so that the GOP-controlled legislature there can draw up a map more favorable to white Republicans, and Tennessee is rushing to do the same, and Sarah Huckabee, if she ever stops eating crayons long enough to go to work, she'll be doing the same. The states that are most affected by all this really don't have many members of the immigrant Black Caucus in there, and they know this. So when you see them all in a lather over TPS, what does that tell you? To them, this is an opportunity to replace the FBA bootlicks who are going to be out of office soon, and in their minds, they'll be telling Democrats, this is why you have to hurry up and get more immigrants in here and give blanket amnesty so that we can help reinforce those black voters down south. But in reality, they don't want to live in those states because those are the poorest states in America. Their immigrant kin are going to go to New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, places where the economies actually work. And they'll be there backing up the Richie Torreses and others and telling them that they'll support them when they run for Senate or for governor. That's the three-dimensional chess that the immigrants in the CBC are playing. Wes Moore knows he doesn't have the FBA support that he wishes he did, so he would love to have other immigrants there to support him when he tries to run for president. So immigrants like Roly Poly are trying to gin up some support so that Haitians like himself don't risk getting deported, but not once will he say what's going to actually be done. The old saying is that the best defense is a good offense, but you can't fight anyone's offense with nothing at all. Running for office without any discernible policy is an empty political exercise, and voting for someone without knowing what you're going to get is a waste of time. Republicans made it clear that they were running for office so they could weaponize the government against Black Americans. Their voters knew this too. They did this at the state and federal levels. And in every single race where a Democrat was running against these Republicans, what did that Democratic candidate promise to do to stop them? Nothing. Democrats were furious that Black activists forced them to enact some admittedly modest policies back in the 1960s. People like Joe Biden, though, admitted even then that they hated those reforms and opposed them. Democrats decided back in the 1960s that they would never again allow Black to be shoehorned into the subject of national policy. They would use these amorphous words and phrases instead, words that were nothing but rhetorical Trojan horses, like minorities, which includes white gay men, white disabled people, white non-Christians, white women, etc. And another one is people of color, which means immigrants who come from countries and cultures that practice violent anti-Black racism, which they bring here. Democrats made it a point to never say Black as it pertains to policy, and to never challenge the Republican lie that policies that actually balance out the racism that Blacks have been subjected to is somehow illegal or unconstitutional. So Roly Poly can miss me with this garbage about we need to make sure that we have the most aggressive voter registration campaign since the civil rights movement. The entire reason that Republicans control so many of these state legislatures is because the Democratic Party has let them do so. The Democrats have just stood by and watched this happen. Why? Because the Democratic Party is nothing more than a DC-based social club. All they care about are congressional seats. There are states that they could have captured decades ago. Michigan's a good example. They didn't have to wait until the last few years to get Michigan. They could have had it back in the 90s. But the party is being run by people who only care what happens inside the Beltway because that's where K Street is and that's where the lobbyist money is at. And that's why the Voting Rights Act didn't matter to them. The threats to the Voting Rights Act were coming from outside the Beltway, and they don't care what happens outside the Beltway. They refuse to understand that the states draw the district maps and that someone wants to weaponize that process to eliminate Democrats from Congress, and the worst thing that you can do under those circumstances is nothing. But that's exactly what the Democrats did. So no, Roly, this is not going to scare us to the polls. Democrats are responsible for what's happening as much as the Republicans are. There will be no more voting without Democrats saying what they're going to do, and what they're going to do is what we tell them. The threat from the white right is real, but it's not new. And as long as Democrats refuse to say what they're going to do to dismantle these GOP laws and illegal judicial rulings, then we will give them as much support as they've given us. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Sabrina Scott, Wahib Abdul, Atu Hammond, Willa the Father, and Dia Williams. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.